The cosmos, as it turned out, wasn't merely apathetic to humanity's presence. It was genuinely exasperated by it, much like noticing a raccoon burrowing through the grand refuse bins of space-time. The ancient species of the Galactic Confederation had identified Earth and hastily deemed it picturesque yet troublesome 53 standard cycles ago. Humanity had attained faster-than-light travel via what Confederation researchers referred to as the most excessively convoluted and potentially disastrous technique imaginable. Humans named it the Alcubierre drive. Everyone else labeled it that horrifying space-time churner the primates constructed. Nevertheless, it functioned, and abruptly the galaxy had to cope with yet another variety of upright mammals with lofty illusions. The diplomatic exchange hall on Proxima Station radiated with the sort of contrived shine produced solely by the knowledge that influential figures would be evaluating one's design preferences. Delegates from 37 interstellar civilizations mingled, drifted, or slithered, based on their respective evolutionary quirks, within the expansive chamber. The lighting was tuned for 16 distinct visual spectra, causing everyone to appear dreadful in slightly different ways. And then I informed the Cascathic envoy, rambled a gooey official from the methane-inhaling Bovian collective, that if they desired the excavation rights to the Epsilon sector, they would be obliged to offer at least 3 further interpretive dance exhibitions, clarifying their cultural attachment to mineral extraction. Ambassador Miller from Earth, sporting a professional grin while mentally estimating how many beverages would be considered tactful at this gathering, nodded congenially. This was diplomacy, smiling through clear absurdities while striving to forestall interstellar conflict. The human had perfected what experienced envoys dubbed the nod and plate, a strategy largely honed during parent-teacher meetings on Earth and now implemented across the cosmos. Intriguing, Ambassador Miller responded, having mastered the knack of sounding intrigued while contemplating literally anything else. The Confederation's emphasis on cultural expression as an aspect of resource allocation remains most enlightening. What Ambassador Miller did not add was that the majority of humans consider the Confederation's bureaucracy a surreal combination of the DMV, tax season, and a sanctimonious reading club compiled into one cosmic farce. But humans had swiftly learned, when in Rome, adopt Roman practices, when among technologically superior species, politely pretend their intricate systems are rational. This delicate ballet of ceremonial pleasantries might have carried on forever if the Verloc had not selected that exact juncture to reveal their newest pacification mission. The holographic projection materialized at the center of the hall, causing multiple drinks to be dropped and at least one methane breather to release an alarmed burst of combustible vapor. The imposing, Kenton-armored figure of High Commander Parker of the Verloc Dominion appeared, mandibles scraping with what equated to glee in that species. "Attention, refined denizens of the Confederation," the insectoid officer declared, the voice translator unable to fully mask the clicking undertones. "The Dominion is gratified to announce that we have effectively subdued the unruly human stations in the Teddy region. Their feeble protections proved insufficient, as anticipated for such a rudimentary race." The hall fell quiet. Even the ceaselessly babbling Bovian envoy ceased its frothing commentary. All eyes, optical scanners, and sensing limbs swiveled toward Ambassador Miller. "Pardon me," Ambassador Miller said, voice slicing through the abrupt hush with striking clarity. "Could you explain what you mean by subdued?" High Commander Parker's compound eyes glinted with an odd blend of amusement and scorn. "Is the human translation mechanism broken? We have neutralized your colonies, eliminated them. They were obstructing legitimate advancement of resources that benefit enlightened civilization." "Those were civilian settlements," the human responded, still projecting that diplomatic grin that now appeared almost frozen, "with households, children, more than 30,000 individuals." High Commander Parker waved a chitin-covered limb dismissively. Yes, most regrettable. But the Dominion submitted document CR 7291 bits requesting usage of underdeveloped zones to the Confederation Resource Management Council. It was authorized last cycle. "We never received any notification about such a form," Ambassador Miller replied. A tall, paperwork-laden Flexen sidled forward, 7 of its 12 appendages grasping a variety of data pads. Actually, the notice was correctly routed to Earth's Central Receiving Center, as stipulated by Confederation Protocol Section 947, Clause 32, Subclause Q. It explicitly states all member species must inspect their designated communication terminals at least every 73 standard hours. That equates to 3 Earth days, Ambassador Miller clarified. You sent a message indicating your intent to strike our colonies, gave us 72 hours to locate it, probably buried under 177,000 other records. Procedure is procedure. The Flexen sniffed or emitted a noise akin to a sniff through its breathing slits. The Verloc complied meticulously with protocol. Ambassador Miller surveyed the chamber, noticing how many of the diplomats were affirming the Flexen statement. 53 years of adhering to the Confederation's maze-like standards, being the courteous newcomer, indulging unfunny jokes and acting as though triple-checked paperwork was a sensible mode of interstellar liaison. All of it abruptly felt like a galactic-scale prank. This marks the third human settlement the Verloc have subdued in recent months, Ambassador Miller said, voice now stripped of all pseudo-pleasantness. Each instance you've hidden behind your administrative network. Each time, we lodged official objections using the accepted channels. Each time, those objections were misplaced or stalled due to processing obstacles. High Commander Parker's mandibles clacked quickly, which humans had discovered was their version of laughter. Possibly if your race were more adept at navigating sophisticated systems, you wouldn't discover yourselves at such a disadvantage. Nature favors the organizationally efficient. Ambassador Miller reached into a pocket and produced a compact communicator. One press of a button opened a secure link to Earth's Consolidated Defense Command. The ambassador did not bother with secrecy. This is Ambassador Miller, Diplomatic Clearance Alpha 79er, sending authorization code Omega Protocol. The Verloc have devastated Teddy. Verified civilian deaths exceed 30,000. This follows attacks on the Epsilon Eridani and Prion stations, requesting immediate enactment of contingency Barbarossa. The device emitted a succinct confirmation tone. Ambassador Miller returned it to a pocket and raised their gaze to discover the entire chamber observing, a mix of puzzlement, amusement, and in several cases, the initial flickers of alarm. What was that? Inquired the Jovian delegate, its gaseous suit rippling inquisitively. A kind of emotional release ceremony? We are aware that less advanced races frequently require catharsis under stress. That, Ambassador Miller answered, was me informing my government that the era of politeness has ended. High Chancellor Roberts of the Confederation, an aged Arcturian whose parchment-like skin was carried by a gravity disk, hovered forward. Come now, Ambassador, let us not be impetuous. I'm positive we can form a subcommittee to re-examine the Verloc's resource utilization procedures, perhaps next standard cycle. There's a spot open on the 47th rotation. Ambassador Miller smiled, not the typical diplomatic grin, but a different one, the variety that produced chills in species fortunate enough to possess spines. Chancellor, with all possible respect, which is currently negligible. Humanity has attempted to abide by your regulations. We've filled out your documents, we've gone to your cultural sensitivity workshops. We've even pretended your universal translator's comedic add-ons are entertaining, which, frankly, they're not. A shocked murmur spread through the diplomats. But at this point, Ambassador Miller resumed, you have misread our politeness for powerlessness, our tolerance for incapacity, our constraint for limitation. So allow me to be unequivocal in delivering my government's definitive reply to these strikes. The ambassador's tone traveled through the hall without volume escalation, yet somehow it resonated with every single listener. This is Earth's final caution. Cease destroying our colonies or we cease pretending to be refined. High Commander Parker's mandibles rattled again. Are you threatening us, humans? How adorably primitive. What shall you do? Hurl rocks at our war cruisers. A few in voice tittered warily. The Octarian Chancellor raised spindly arms in a soothing gesture. No doubt the human is just experiencing emotional turmoil. We are aware their species is prone to these eruptions. Actually, Ambassador Miller responded, consulting a small watch, in about 45 seconds, you will receive your explanation. As though on cue, the enormous holographic panels across the diplomatic exchange hall flickered. Security overrides kicking in while every data channel on the station was commandeered simultaneously. The visage of a stern human in a military uniform appeared on every monitor. I am Admiral Cooper of the Earth Defense Fleet, addressing all Confederation species. The obliteration of our outposts constitutes an act of war in both Earth and Confederation legalities, Section 1293, Clause 7, for any who appreciate formal references. We attempted to negotiate peace via your systems without success. Therefore, starting immediately, Earth invokes Article 17 of the Confederation Charter, the entitlement to proportional retaliation. The Flexen administrator began ferociously sifting through tablets. There is no such article. I have memorized all 9,347 articles of the Charter. Verify the appendices. Ambassador Miller advised coolly. The ones Earth submitted at our induction. The ones you never bothered reading because, quoting multiple delegates here. What could a primitive species possibly contribute to galactic statutes? Admiral Cooper proceeded. A demonstration of Earth's retaliatory capabilities will begin in 30 seconds. We suggest all Confederation personnel direct their observation sensors to the deserted moon of Verloc Prime. That is all. The broadcast ended. High Commander Parker's compound eyes widened with what appeared to be the Dominion's initial genuine display of apprehension. "This is ludicrous," Parker sputtered. "Humans lack the kind of military prowess that could ever." The commander's words froze as a fresh feed took over the holographic screens, this time providing a live view of the barren, crater-filled moon orbiting the Verloc homeworld. For an instant, nothing transpired. Then, with no visible blast or beam, half of the moon simply vanished. No detonation, no dramatic fanfare. In one moment it was intact, in the next it had a flawless semicircle removed, the new flat surface glowing like hot embers around the edge. A profound hush gripped the diplomatic exchange hall. Ambassador Miller exhaled, sounding genuinely rueful for the first time. "We really did not want to do that, you know. We were quite content in the part of enthusiastic newcomers, gleaning knowledge from our more advanced galactic neighbors. It was so much simpler." What was that?" High Chancellor Roberts whispered, his aged voice trembling. "That," Ambassador Miller pronounced, "was a lone vessel utilizing something we describe as a contained demonstration apparatus. The real armaments are far more dramatic. We've possessed it for about 30 Earth years, roughly 15 of your standard cycles. We just never deemed it worth mentioning, as it seemed undiplomatic." High Commander Parker's image had turned rigid, mandibles half raised in shock. Oh, and before anyone contemplates any rash maneuvers, Ambassador Miller continued casually, equivalent ships are now stationed adjacent to the principal worlds of each founding Confederation species. Strictly as a safeguard, you see. We so-called primitives do care for our safety. The humans scanned the hall, meeting the stunned gazes of 37 species, who had abruptly realized they'd been condescending to a wolf disguised as a lamb. "Well then," Ambassador Miller said cheerily, grabbing a nearly drained glass off a passing tray, "shall we discuss those colonial indemnities? I think we can forego the interpretive dance prerequisites this time. The issue with threatening to unleash devastation upon your cosmic allies is that it frequently renders subsequent diplomatic summits uneasy. Ambassador Miller experienced this directly when strolling into the Confederation's Emergency Council Chamber 3 standard days after what was being called the lunar demonstration. Conversation halted abruptly. Limbs retracted and environmental apparatuses seemed to contract somewhat, as though their inhabitants were instinctively trying to become less conspicuous. Ambassador Miller grinned pleasantly and occupied the designated seat at the vast crystal-like table, pretending not to notice when representatives from the Jovian moons nudged their hovering chairs about a meter farther away. "Now then," croaked the Octarian Chancellor, fracturing the painful silence, "this is unquestionably an unparalleled circumstance. The Council has gathered to address recent exhibitions and pave the way for a harmonious conclusion to the current aggression." The Verloc envoy, distinctly not the same officer from the prior transmission, clicked mandibles nervously. "The Dominion wishes to proclaim its reconsideration of resource extraction objectives in human-occupied systems." "So benevolent of you," Ambassador Miller replied, tone laden with enough acidity to fill a small ocean. "And restitution for our demolished colonies." The Verloc official's compound eyes darted, searching for solidarity from fellow councilors, finding none. "The Dominion considers that perhaps a bilateral de-escalation is in the best interest of all before hashing out those specifics." "I understand," Ambassador Miller said. "So you prefer we stand down our defensive measures before you've even acknowledged responsibility for slaughtering 30,000 noncombatants? Quite in character for the Verloc, if you ask me." The Chancellor lifted his aged hands. "We may want to start by establishing some fundamentals. The human demonstration was exceedingly formidable, yet uncertainties persist regarding humanity's genuine potential and motives." A cobalt-skinned Regalian analyst hovered forward, tentacles clutching a data orb. "Our initial findings suggest the lunar demonstration relied on some manner of matter removal technology previously undiscovered by Confederation science. We do wonder if this is the full scope of human warfare aptitude, or just a meticulously arranged single-use system. Ambassador Miller smiled with no warmth whatsoever. Are you curious why we didn't unveil our real scientific prowess upon joining your confederation? It wasn't terror or manipulation, it was courtesy. When you're invited to dine, you don't begin by demonstrating how much stronger, faster, or smarter you might be than your host. It's simply rude. The Regalian's tentacles quivered with something like indignation. The Confederation's technical audit routines are quite rigorous. It's improbable that humans could conceal major breakthroughs. Your routines, Ambassador Miller noted, focus largely on propulsion, communications, and energy synthesis methods. You never specifically inquired about our history of weapon creation. After all, why would a quaint race teach the esteemed Confederation anything about destruction? Preposterous, blurted an envoy from the Elanian domain. You purposely missiled the Confederation. Did we? The human leaned in, elbows braced on the table. We filed all required paperwork, joined every mandated tech-sharing event, contributed our advances in healthcare, farming, and ecological recovery. We never once lied. We just didn't volunteer facts you didn't precisely request. That omission goes against the essence of Confederation membership, insisted High Chancellor Roberts. Does it? Ambassador Miller arched an eyebrow. Interesting stance. Tell me, Chancellor, when were you planning to disclose Earth's knowledge of the Confederation's covered bioresearch labs in the Tilway Quadrant, the ones producing species-specific pathogens? Or would you rather I pretend we're unaware of those as well? Pandemonium erupted in the chamber, with many members shouting denials, some translators glitching under the barrage. Ambassador Miller waited calmly for the uproar to pass, regarding their fingernails with theatrical indifference. When relative peace returned, the ambassador spoke again in a composed, moderate tone. Let's skip the Fox outrage, shall we? Earth is not invested in your political turf wars, succession struggles, or resource battles. We merely want to exist without having our outposts obliterated, because some species filled out the correct forms. What precisely do you humans desire? Asked the Chancellor, abruptly seeming every bit his 3 centuries of age. Immediate cessation of all aggression toward human settlements, complete recompense for lives and facilities lost, and official acknowledgement of Earth's protective boundary, including every system we currently inhabit. The Verloc envoy's mandibles clacked in what resembled anxious laughter. And if these demands are disregarded, additional demonstrations. Almost on cue, the ambassador's communicator buzzed. Scanning it, Ambassador Miller's face turned significantly graver. It appears, the ambassador stated quietly, that the Verloc Dominion has just directed an assault squadron toward our colony in the Prune system. Apparently, they assume our lunar exhibition was our single tactic. How unfortunate. The Verloc representative froze, mandibles mid-click. That cannot be. I received no word of any offensive operation. It's infuriating, isn't it, when reports fail to reach you through the official process. The human smirked faintly, then addressed the entire council. Members of the Confederation, I propose you target your observation instruments toward the Prune system. It should prove instructive. The central holographic array in the chamber lit up, streaming a live feed from the Confederation's own monitors. 8 huge Verloc warships, identifiable by their elongated cylindrical hulls, closed in on a modest human colony planet. Those vessels are designated Annihilator-class dreadnoughts. Breathed Aurelian observer, each can melt a planet's surface into molten rock. Yes, the human concurred, they're rather imposing indeed, a testament to the Verloc Navy's objective of spreading fear through the quadrant. They are truly enormous, the Chancellor exclaimed, glancing apprehensively at Ambassador Miller. You seem unexpectedly calm for someone whose colony is seemingly about to be decimated. Do I? The ambassador checked the communicator yet again. Ah, impeccable timing, our defense squadron has just arrived. Collectively, the council leaned forward, presumably expecting to see a sizable human task force show up to confront the Verloc formation. Instead, a lone small craft popped into view, no bigger than a routine Confederation courier. Laughter or species-specific equivalents rippled across the hall. That's your defense force? The Verloc envoy's confidence appeared to revive. One tiny ship against 8 dreadnoughts? Maybe you humans are as basic as we assumed. Quantity isn't everything, Ambassador Miller answered, something your people might grasp eventually. Indeed, we have a saying. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. The translators struggled with the expression, triggering puzzled murmurs throughout the chamber. On screen, The diminutive human ship sped toward the Verloc line, which was already aligning for an assault. The dreadnoughts unleashed a barrage of plasma and laser arcs, a spectacular cosmic performance converging on the human craft. Not a single impact landed. The human vessel maneuvered with inconceivable agility, dodging the unified fire of 8 capital warships. It danced among the energy beams as though they moved at half speed, at times swooping so near a dreadnought that it skimmed the outer hull. "I see your targeting methods are thorough," Ambassador Miller remarked offhandedly. "Quite exhaustive coverage. Sadly, they assume your quarry abides by the same physical constraints your species understands." The Rillian technician's tentacles fluttered wildly across scanning controls. "This is inconceivable. The human craft is performing micro-jumps in standard space. The power usage alone would be astronomical." "Yes," Ambassador Miller admitted, "if one depended on conventional drive technologies. We ceased using those for wartime applications nearly 200 Earth years ago, well before we encountered you all." On the display, the human ship carried out yet another series of surreal evasions before stopping precisely at the heart of the Verloc formation. For a brief span, nothing transpired. Then tiny objects, scarcely visible on the projection, detached from the human craft and zipped toward every dreadnought. "Missiles," the Veteran voice sneered, "futile against energy shields." "How crude. Not missiles," corrected Ambassador Miller, "boarding modules." The entire council sat in stunned silence while these small pods lashed onto each dreadnought. Within seconds, the colossal Verloc vessels ceased firing. One after another, their engines deactivated. "What is going on?" the Chancellor demanded. Ambassador Miller shrugged lightly. "Our Marines are having a cordial dialogue with the Verloc personnel about the principle of proportional reaction. I believe they're being exceedingly convincing." As if to confirm that statement, the station's communications system engaged, transmitting a message from the human craft. "This is Captain Bennett of the EDF Tenacity. All Verloc dreadnoughts have been seized with minimal harm. Crews are being placed in cryostasis for deportation to Verloc territory. Please note that all weapons, propulsion mechanisms, and navigation archives are being confiscated for analysis. The vessels will be navigated back to Verloc space on autopilot once their combat modules are removed. Tenacity out." Again the council fell into speechless astonishment, interrupted only by the sound of the Verloc representative's mandibles chattering in apparent panic. 8 dreadnoughts?" the Aurelian analyst finally uttered softly, subdued by a single ship and a few boarding pods without annihilating them. "How?" Ambassador Miller casually leaned back, looking genuinely at ease for the first time since arriving. Human military doctrine diverges sharply from standard Confederation patterns. You emphasize bigger equals superior, heavier firepower equals greater security. Our own tumultuous past taught us otherwise. "Explain," the Chancellor said. "We discovered that genuine military supremacy isn't about who constructs the largest gun or toughest shield. It's about fulfilling your objectives with accuracy, economy, and if feasible, minimal fatalities," Ambassador Miller said, motioning toward the display in which the dreadnoughts were systematically shut down. "Your species build armaments meant to devastate. We produce armaments meant to incapacitate, infiltrate, and control. Your aim is demolition, ours is triumph. There is a crucial difference. This is breaching Confederation wartime guidelines," an older Elanian counselor objected. "Capturing another species' warships is outright forbidden by Section 42, Clause 19 of the Martial Conduct Code." Ambassador Miller concluded, "Indeed, and we are also aware of the exception for vessels actively engaging in unsanctioned aggression against civilian worlds. Section 42, Clause 22. You would do well to examine your own rules more meticulously." The Chancellor's hover disk whirred as he neared the human. "These capabilities you've now showcased constitute a remarkable alteration of the power dynamic within the Confederation. Solely for anyone who contemplates attacking us," Ambassador Miller explained. "For everyone else, nothing changes. We're still the same humans who have provided medical progress, ecological repair methods, and cultural collaborations for half a century. We never intended to reveal this part of ourselves." "Why invent such weaponry at all?" asked the Regalian quietly. The human's demeanor grew distant, reflective. "Before venturing into space, we nearly eradicated ourselves multiple times. We learned the hard way that peace isn't guaranteed by good intentions. Occasionally it requires the credible menace of decisive counteraction." The ambassador stood, smoothing out the formal uniform with methodical care. "Shall we resume our original conversation now? Settlement reparations, termination of hostility, and recognition of Earth's defensive boundary. I trust the Verloc might be more inclined to negotiate sincerely at this stage. The Verloc envoy's mandibles were utterly unmoving for likely the first time in recorded memory. The representative only managed a stiff nod. "Marvelous," Ambassador Miller said, once again wearing a congenial expression. "And perhaps afterward, we can have a frank discussion about any other subjects humanity has politely chosen not to mention." An uneasy tremor passed through the assembled representatives of the Galactic Confederation as they collectively grasped a chilling reality. They had no clue what else these pleasant, courteous primitives could be concealing. Even more disturbing, the humans didn't appear especially eager to show them. Galactic historians would later pinpoint the next week as the swiftest, most dramatic rebalancing of authority in Confederation chronicles. While envoys stammered over compensation terms, the Verloc's Supreme Command, seemingly unsatisfied by two prior humiliations, initiated a desperate offensive on Earth itself. The rationale, as gleaned from intercepted transmissions, was, if we annihilate their home planet, their off-world sites will capitulate regardless of any advance tricks. The strike group emerged from hyperspace to discover Earth evidently unguarded. No orbital defense rigs, no security web, just a lovely blue-green planet ready for easy conquest. That alone ought to have been the Verloc's first clue. What ensued wasn't really a battle so much as a breathtaking demonstration of technology. Earth's very atmosphere appeared to awaken, teeming with microscopic defensive drones that stripped the Verloc ships molecule by molecule. Weapon systems simply ceased, guidance modules diverted vessels into holding patterns. The once mighty Armada drifted uselessly in orbit, fully dismantled in under 3 minutes. As the Confederation Council witnessed in morbid fascination, Ambassador Miller sipped tea with aggravating nonchalance. "We referred to it as our planetary immune network," the ambassador explained mid-sip, "designed after our third global conflict. Fairly successful, wouldn't you say?" When a Regalian pressed for an explanation of how such hardware could exist undetected, the human's answer froze the chamber. "We've had 5 millennia of near-constant warfare on Earth. The last 100 years of tranquility is the aberration, not the norm. We never publicized our fortifications for the same reason you wouldn't give a loaded firearm to a stranger. It's fundamental survival instinct." Ambassador Miller set the teacup down with a delicate clink. "And perhaps at last we can engage in a candid dialogue about humanity's standing in this galaxy. No more facades, no more triple-stamp forms, just mutual acknowledgement between peers." The hush that followed was overwhelming. Half a year after Earth's illustration, as everyone diplomatically referred to it, the Confederation had undergone an astonishing shift. The bureaucracy remained, as some things defy biology, but relations with humans were radically altered. Shockingly, the Verloc transformed into humanity's greatest champions. Their replacement envoy explained this plainly. The humans could have annihilated us, but instead they returned our personnel unharmed alongside a strongly worded notice. Such restraint merits admiration. When the Arcturian High Chancellor Roberts formally honored Earth's enhanced status in the Confederation, granting humans a lasting seat on the Security Council, he included a disturbing piece of honesty in his speech. "We mistook their courtesy for feebleness, their patience for naivety, their restraint for deficiency. Our gravest error wasn't undervaluing human science, it was misunderstanding that their civilization was not proof of natural progress, but rather a deliberate choice by a species that had already mastered savagery." Ambassador Miller accepted the position with typical composure, even presenting a gift, a tiny terrarium with an earth rose growing next to a cluster of weeds. "Civilization and barbarism," the ambassador remarked, "originate from the same soil. We simply decide which one to water." The Confederation delegates offered polite applause, abruptly quite mindful of remaining thoroughly hydrated.